What if everything we learned in history class was, well, wrong? Or at least missing some of the most mind-blowing chapters? Today, we're diving into a book called Earth's Forbidden Secrets, and it poses a huge question. Is our whole understanding of the past just plain wrong? Let's get into it. Okay, so the book kicks things off with a story that just sounds impossible. I want you to picture this. It's 1891. A woman in Illinois is breaking up a lump of coal for her stove. Pretty normal, right? But then, inside, she finds this delicate, beautifully made gold chain. The local newspaper at the time even reported that you could see the perfect impression of the chain left in the two halves of the coal. Now, here's the kicker. That coal is supposed to be 312 million years old. So how in the world does that happen? And believe me, that gold chain is just the tip of the iceberg. The author argues that our history is just littered with these things called out-of-place artifacts, basically objects that have no business being where or when they were found. And probably the most famous example of this is something called the Antikythera device. It was found in a Greek shipwreck that's about 2,000 years old. Just look at this. We're not talking about some simple tool here. This thing was basically an ancient analog computer. It had over 30 interlocking bronze gears, all precisely made. And what did it do? It tracked the movements of the sun, the moon, even the planets. The kind of tech you need to build this, well, it wasn't supposed to show up until the Renaissance, a full 1,500 years later. And yet, here it is, pulled from a shipwreck dating back to 100 BC. It's just mind-boggling.
All right, let's jump over to Mesoamerica because the book points out that this pattern just keeps showing up. Check out these Aztec earplugs. Now, these are made from obsidian, which is this really cool volcanic glass. But here's the thing about obsidian. It is super, super brittle. It's incredibly hard to work with without it just shattering.
And this is the part that absolutely defies explanation. They are polished to a perfect, consistent thickness of less than 1 millimeter. Think about that for a second. The book puts it pretty simply. How on earth could anyone achieve that kind of insane precision on a material that fragile? Especially when all they supposedly had were, primitive hand tools. It just doesn't add up.
Okay, so we've seen artifacts. Now let's talk about maps, because this is where things get really, really weird. Take a look at these two maps. One's from 1531, the other from 1737. The crazy part? They both show Antarctica. But wait, Antarctica wasn't officially discovered until 1820. And it gets even stranger. They don't just show the continent, they seem to show the coastline without the ice. And here is the absolute kicker. That Baruchet map, the one from 1737, it shows Antarctica not as one solid continent, but as two separate landmasses. For decades, everyone just dismissed that as a mistake. But then, 1958 rolls around. Scientists do a seismic survey, and what do they find? Under all that ice, Antarctica really is two large islands. Exactly like the map showed, more than 200 years before we had the technology to know that. So how is that possible? So let's recap. We've got these impossible artifacts, we've got maps that show things they shouldn't be able to show, which brings us to the book's biggest, most important question. If all this evidence is out there, why have most of us never heard of it? Why isn't this stuff in our history textbooks? The mystery suddenly stops being about what these things are and becomes all about why they're hidden. The author makes a really good point. The second you say the word conspiracy, a lot of people just tune out. But look at the definition the book uses. It's not about shadowy figures in smoke-filled rooms. It's way simpler. Two or more people deciding to do something for themselves and not really telling anyone else about it. I mean, that sounds a lot like business as usual, right? It happens in politics, in corporations. So the author asks, why couldn't it happen in the world of academia and history? So, to try and explain why this stuff might be ignored, the book brings up a really great analogy. You've probably heard it before, the classic fairy tale of the emperor's new clothes.
And in this version of the story, the townsfolk are basically the academic establishment, right? They're all cheering and praising the emperor's amazing new clothes, which in this case is the official accepted version of history. But then you have these researchers who find these weird artifacts. They're like the little kid in the story. They're the ones who aren't afraid to just state the obvious and say, hey, why is the king naked? They're pointing out something that doesn't fit, a truth that maybe everyone else is too afraid or too invested to admit they see.
And the book claims this isn't random. It says there's a predictable pattern, almost like a playbook, for how these inconvenient discoveries get buried. First, a researcher presents their findings. Then, almost immediately, they get ridiculed by big names in academia.
If that doesn't shut up, the attacks get personal, trying to discredit the person instead of the evidence. And finally, you get to harassment and bad press until the whole thing just goes away. It's silenced and forgotten.
Okay, so if the official story has all these holes in it, then what's the real story? The book doesn't just point out problems. It actually offers a pretty radical alternative explanation for everything we've been looking at.
And the conclusion the book reaches is, well, it's staggering. It argues that these artifacts aren't just isolated mistakes or flukes. They're actually echoes from a completely lost chapter of human history. We're talking about the possibility of advanced, forgotten civilizations like Atlantis or Lemuria. Civilizations that had sophisticated technology, maybe even atomic energy. The book even points to evidence that suggests humans lived at the same time as dinosaurs and were performing successful brain surgery way back in the Neolithic age. I mean, this isn't just a tweaked timeline. This is a completely different story of humanity.
So in the end, the book leaves us with this one really unsettling question to chew on. Is the history we know the story of what truly happened, or is it just the story we're allowed to hear? It really challenges you to look at our past not as some finished, closed book, but maybe, just maybe, as a collection of forbidden secrets that are still out there, just waiting to be found. A lot to think about.